So Manisha, we've chosen impact investing as the first theme that we're covering on these Thai Talks podcasts, partly because we think there's a lot of Thai members out there that are interested in the impact space or are already looking at kind of investing themselves. But partly also because the Thai global programs are now being aligned to the UN sustainability goals. So there's a lot of interesting thought leadership, I think, to unpick. Sugandhi is a great person that we're going to be interviewing today around this space. Sugandhi is one of the 3 founding partners at ABC Impact. And I'm really looking forward to chatting with her about the latest developments in impact measurement, the trade-offs of impact and profit, and future opportunities that there might be in the impact investing space.
This is going to be an interesting conversation. I want to especially get her views on impact investing from a return perspective, because there's a lot of debate about, is it whatever that you invest for impact is probably too purpose-driven, but it doesn't really make that much money. But let's see what she has to say.
We'll find out. Welcome, Sugandhi Matta. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Sugandhi is the Chief Impact Officer of ABC Impact, one of the 3 founding partners there, which is a impact-led private equity fund backed by Temasek.
That's right.
So tell us more about your relationship with Thai.
I've been a member of Thai for this is my 2nd year now. I think it's a great opportunity to meet really like-minded individuals who are passionate about supporting entrepreneurship. I've also found a renewed interest in sustainability and impact.
Today we're here to talk to you about impact investing. What's the biggest myth in impact investing?
One of the things, my pet peeves or myths, is that impact can't be measured. And I think that's what I spend a large part of my time trying to bust that myth.
We'll come back to the impact measurement for sure. What's a portfolio company that you want to share today that you're most excited about?
I'm very excited about a company which is called Healthcare at Home in India. It basically started by providing rehab and recuperation facilities at home, and it's now sort of morphed into providing all care outside of a hospital. I think we all saw during COVID how much pressure hospitals and tertiary care centers are, and anything you can do to relieve that pressure from a system, particularly for emerging countries like India, Vietnam, is really important, and that business has been doing that in India. It's very impactful, but also profitable and sustainable.
Is healthcare the sector you're most excited about, would you say, in the impact space, in terms of impact as well as returns? Or?
So at ABC Impact, we're investing in broadly 2 themes. So we invest in social impact and climate impact. So within social, we look at financial inclusion, healthcare, and education. All 3 essential services that are missing in most emerging markets are big gaps in terms of quality, affordability, and availability. We also invest behind climate, so we invest in food and ag and climate tech solutions, renewable energy, etc. So these are the sort of 2 themes that we're really passionate about, and we feel that there's tremendous opportunity in Asia.
Let's start with your personal journey. So you started as a more traditional investor in private equity, and then you made the shift into the impact space.
I did. So I've been working now in investing for 19 years. Spent the first 10 doing traditional private equity. I actually started my career with Temasek Holdings in the financial services team. Back in 2012, I had a personal reckoning. I'm actually a breast cancer survivor. And I went through the whole journey. And when I came back to work, I kind of asked myself some of these questions. What did I want to be doing? Where did I want to put my energy? And that's when I found investing with a purpose. I joined Leapfrog, one of the pioneers of impact investing. And then 6 years ago, became part of the founding team at ABC Impact. So my motivation for impact investing is really to continue to do what I love, which is investing, backing entrepreneurs trying to solve real world problems, and then working with them to sort of amplify the change that we can all create.
Earlier you mentioned there are 2 sort of pillars, right? One is the social impact and the other one is the climate impact. If somebody is new to investing and sees those 2, how would you want them to sort of approach these? Because there's always a social impact has a social angle to it. Climate is something that will probably take many, many years for us to really see a bit of a difference, right? So how would you guide somebody who's looking at these 2 to sort of make a decision? B is if somebody comes in, wants to make an impact maybe in their current lifetime, which one is probably worth navigating in towards?
I will say that social and climate is people and planet, right? And when you think about it from that perspective, it's very difficult to extricate the 2, right? People need the planet to be
Yes.
thriving. Planet impacted by people, feeding the people, right? I think when you build careers or you think about where you should allocate your energy to, I think you have to look at what your technical background is and choose sectors in social are a lot more established, a lot more predictable. There's obviously tech innovation, but that's more around processes and leveraging technology to do things faster, cheaper, etc. But the fundamentals of financial services, microinsurance, microfinance, they're all established.
Right.
While climate, as you rightly said, there's a lot of innovation that we're all expecting and hoping will happen. I'm very optimistic. But it's going to require a bit more of a riskier appetite, a bit more science-based backgrounds that I think will do well. So yeah, intrinsically linked, both super impactful. Look at what you've kind of done in your career and kind of pick one of the two.
Let's dig a bit more into the impact measurement side. What are some of the metrics and processes that are currently used, the methodologies?
So when we think about impact investing, what we're saying is that we will underwrite impact. What that means is ex ante, before making the investment decision, just like we have financial projections and an expected IRR, we will also have projections for impact metrics. These could be number of consumers provided with the healthcare services, number of students who accessed education of a higher quality, number of metric tons of GHG emissions emitted. So we underwrite impact, and when the investment process is complete or we exit the investment, we have to go back and see how we did vis-a-vis what we expected. Now, this is very different from someone making an investment in a company, which turns out to be a great investment from a GHG emissions averted, and they measure it later and tell us that, listen, this investment averted these many metric tons of greenhouse gas equivalent emissions. But the decision to invest wasn't made on the basis of that happening. It's a post-facto analysis, and there's nothing wrong with that, but that's not impact investing. That's not investing with the intentionality of underwriting impact. So I think that's kind of one of the key pillars of our industry, which is the intention and the ex-ante analysis of impact. The second big concept that I think is really gaining steam is called a theory of change, which is a simple way to kind of map the products and services of the company to the impact that you expect to be delivered. Just take a simple case. You have an edtech company in India. We are invested in a company called Vedantu, which provides supplementary tuition online and offline all over the country. So one of the big sort of basis of our theory of change is that kids who are in tier 2 and tier 3 cities previously couldn't access the best teachers because those were all in tier 1 cities. So the only way for you to access a good quality teacher is if that teacher is teaching online or through technology. And that would help a tier 2 or tier 3 child get access to better teaching. They'll do better in the exams. They'll get into a better college, and lifetime earnings will be higher. Now, that theory of change needs to be supported by evidence. So we have actually spent a lot of time both digging into evidence before we invested, but also building evidence while we are invested in the company around are kids actually attending the classes? If they attend the classes, are their scores actually improving? And are they able to make it to the better quality schools, right? So that the theory of change it's a logical visualization of what you expect to happen. It also helps to challenge a lot of people who want to push back on whether this can actually have that impact. So if you have evidence to show to people, they are more likely to believe that, yes, this change is happening, you know what to measure. And then the final thing I'll talk about impact measurement is that it is a work in progress. We invest a lot of time and resources in measuring it, but some of these things just take a long time. Social change, education, improvement of financial literacy. But one of the things I always like telling people, which I mentioned to you earlier, is also we don't let perfection get in the way of perfectly good. So you kind of have to start, and waiting for that perfect measurement shouldn't stop you from starting on this journey.
So the horizons are potentially a lot longer.
They could be potentially a lot longer. The company's ability to measure them could be limited. Our investment horizon could not be as long as the impact horizon. So there's a few boundary conditions that we do navigate through.
And that could be a big challenge, isn't it? Just to be able to show those dollars and cents or whichever way you want to measure impact. How many lives changed? How many kids who got into this program were able to earn maybe X percentage better compared to the previous generation. It takes a long time, and that's the kind of commitment not everybody is willing to make, because people do get impatient when the returns don't come in quickly.
These are long-term studies. These are big population studies. The good thing about our industry is that we are really super collaborative, because everybody wants this to work. They are really incentivized to share information. So if people are interested in impact investing, one of the associations is called the Global Impact Investing Network, or the GIN. And their website is a great source of studies where, different investors who've invested in, say, agriculture, get together and share information about their impact KPIs, so that we can all benefit from their experience. Another resource that I can suggest is in Singapore. There is a Center of Impact Investing in Practices, CIIP, whose website, again, has tremendous amount of resources. They've also done a few studies, particularly around financial inclusion in Southeast Asia, to really document the impact that some of these investments have had, so that we can learn.
That's great. So one hand, while we're able to see the impact on these sites, if somebody wants to be part of the theory of change, for example, how does one get involved, Sugandhi?
So there's a few courses online where you can learn on how to build a theory of change. So I know the Oxford School has online course around impact investing, on the SDGs. So there's a lot of public resources available. There's obviously a lot of firms that work with us around impact measurements. So think of the usual suspects, the consulting firms, the Dalbergs, Bridgespans of the world. So they put out quite a bit of resources for you to start. But with theory of change, honestly, you can look at your own business, your own life, and see where you're spending time, what are the impacts it's having. It's actually a very good logical framework to think about investing both time and money, even at an individual level.
So you talked there about the collaboration within the industry to build these impact measurement kind of frameworks. Do you see that there's an advantage to having proprietary frameworks around impact measurement, or is that something you'd like to see that the entire industry has one view on their standards set?
Actually, it's the conversation in the industry has very much progressed into let's not create proprietary frameworks, because I think we did learn from the early challenges of ESG around having different alphabet soups, of indicators. So I think the merit of having proprietary is diluted. Having said that, if you're a very, very specialized fund that only invests in minerals or resources and you feel like there's a different way to measure it, sure. But largely the industry is very much coalescing behind standardized language, standardized nomenclature. If you go back to the GIN, which is the Global Impact Investing Network, they have IRIS plus metrics, which are standard metrics for every subsector. So if you go to the IRIS, that's IRIS website, it's actually quite intuitively structured. So if you are underwriting impact around farmers having more income, it really walks you through building your theory of change. It walks you through what metrics you should measure. So it's almost like a how-to guide to do it. For ABC Impact, when we designed our impact measurement and management framework, this was back in 2018, so 6 years ago, we sort of canvassed the market. We spoke to all the big players to understand what was best practices, and we chose the IMP's 5 dimensions of impact as the base of our framework. Just to spend a minute, what are the 5 dimensions of impact? This is the what of the impact. So what impact are you hoping to achieve? Who are the beneficiaries and were they underserved? How much, again, quantitative, people love the numbers. So how much impact are you delivering? This could be in terms of scale, so number of people, GHG, etc. It could be depth, because how much of one person's life did you change, particularly healthcare interventions. There's contribution, which is around the counterfactual, right? We want our capital to be additional. So if we had not funded this company, what would happen, right? Some way of thinking about that. And then risks. These risks are around, what are the risks that the impact won't be delivered? There's time risk, there's execution risk, there's evidence risk, there's quite a few. So when we chose that framework, it was already emerging as one of the most standard frameworks that people were using. And, I'm very proud or happy to say that 6 years later, more and more investors are using the same wireframe. They build their own kind of scoring and evaluation metric on top of that. But as an industry, we're very, very committed to having a common language And as I mentioned earlier, right, there's a lot of sharing in the industry on metrics, particularly on the impact side, so that we can give our investors, LPs, some way to also compare between our performances.
Yeah, because that's always a challenge, isn't it?
It's always a challenge. I mean, it's so easy to stick an SDG on a PowerPoint slide, right? And I think, we've all faced that. Nothing wrong with it. I'm always, one of the things that I would love people to take away from this conversation is just optimism. I think a lot of people come to some of these conversations just ready to disbelieve that, any change is happening, or that, you're just traditional private equity dressed up in different garb. I think it's really important that we all maintain that optimism, that belief that people are trying to change, and then ask all the questions you want to ask about measurement, about data, etc. Right? But impact washing, greenwashing, impact light, these are all terms that are emerging. I think the focus is, you spend time with the investors, understand their processes, understand how they make decisions.
So you're 6 years into using this metrics framework, this impact framework around the 5 areas that you just talked through. What results are you starting to see?
So we put out an impact report every year, which we just released in March, the one for calendar year 2023. And we've been able to demonstrate really detailed measurement on financial services in terms of customers who received loans, in healthcare, education, and sort of climate. So we are being able to track the performance of the companies based on what we expected. And we're positively happy that it's on track. A few things to understand, right, for viewers is when we underwrite impact, most of it is very, very strongly correlated to business performance. So, you want the impact to move in line with the business. And if you look at the last few years, obviously different businesses have had different impacts because of COVID. Like some business models have been very, very positively impacted. EdTech, remote healthcare, for example, very, very positive tailwinds of COVID. And then some sectors, where we had an investment in Sunseap, which is a renewable business, which we've exited. Very difficult to install solar panels during the COVID lockdowns. So, foreign workers were not allowed to work, etc. So when you look at those things, you do see those impacts of both positive tailwinds, so impact being way more than we expected because of positive tailwinds, and then we also see impact slightly delayed because of things like not being able to install infrastructure, etc. We're actually also doing some work which will be published later in the year, where we're actually doing an extensive analysis of the beneficiaries of each of the companies, so the customers and everyone who's benefited from the products and services, to see what we can learn about impact.
Is Mother Earth one of the beneficiaries?
It is, I think when you think about who in the framework for climate deals, it's basically the planet, and it's all of us.
I have a question about actually mid-career workers who are making a switch towards sustainability and impact space. One of the things that always comes up in my discussions with my peers is, hey, if you were to look for a career change, if you want to look for a job, if you want to be an intern, like a 40-plus-year-old intern, where do they go? Where do they find these opportunities? Because once you have acquired certain skills, they're just far. There are a lot of jobs, but what I've realized is they're asking for maybe 8 years of working experience, 5 years of working experience. We didn't have these conversations 8-10 years ago. So the question is, people who are getting trained in this space mid-career, where do you think they can find a relevant job, or there's probably a job fit or a skills fit which sort of benefits both sides?
A few things from where I'm sitting. One is, start closer to home. So my hypothesis for sustainability and impact is that over time, it will become very, very specialized, because each sector, each industry will have its own levers for impact. So right now, you're looking at sort of surface level stuff or easy stuff that's common across multiple sectors, and we're all trying to sort of get that sorted, and that will get sorted. But every incremental effort on sustainability, climate change, impact will require very sector-specific knowledge. So one of the things I tell people is to look closer to home rather than farther from home. So one of the best things to do is, within your organization, put up your hand, understand what's happening, what are their sustainability ambitions, what are their impact investing ambitions, and really try to explore that angle first, rather than trying to step out of what you've done, particularly for mid-career professionals, right? If you've done 20 years, 15 years in metals, you've done 15 years in schools, you've done 15 years in any other industry, right?
Yeah.
Every industry will need to have its own action plan for sustainability, for social impact, for climate impact. So I always encourage people to look closer first. If you're in a space where you just don't want to be part of that industry anymore, and you want to build a sustainability, there's a few different angles to look at it, right? There's obviously the policy and compliance angle, which is one way to attack it. There is the stewardship and communication angle. I intentionally don't use the word PR because that obviously has a very different, but when you're doing a lot of these things, communicating, getting community, workers, supply chain involved is also a big part. So that's another angle that you can see. I see a lot of careers around stewardship. And then finally, the third way to go about it is just very technical and consulting, right? So if you can go, all the consulting firms are building big sustainability and impact practices.
Yes.
So these are three angles to attack and sort of do some research, talk to people.
Oh, that's great, because we see, at least in my industry, I know you may use the word stewardship instead of PR, but we are seeing a huge demand for sustainability communications. Because what's happening is the consultants, and they are preparing all these reports and all these metrics, which are very complicated, and they keep evolving as well, and two metrics are not the same. So there are industry-specific metrics that are evolving. The standards are also getting combined globally because there are way too many standards all around the world to create some sort of baseline. But then when it comes to telling people, so be it, you mentioned, Sugandhi, stakeholders. Stakeholders are employees who joined you because of the purpose-driven organization that you said you are, right? Stakeholders are obviously investors as well. There are business partners, that the way that you are choosing suppliers, there's also stakeholders. There's the government. So communicating what you're achieving is become very critical. And that's where there's a lot of demand we're seeing in the market for how do you communicate in a way that shows that you are honest and you're truthful and you're really, you're putting in the work and you're sincere about making an impact.
Yeah. I mean, even in my industry, right, like private equity, traditionally pretty, under our little hood doing our thing. We've also had to step out and communicate, not just as an impact fund. And one of the stakeholders that's, also really important are the companies themselves. So we're actually, all our impact is through the companies. We invest in the companies, and the companies have multiple stakeholders, employees, etc. But we've also realized that it matters to them how their investors talk about them, how their investors see the impact that they're having. So, I couldn't agree more. I think it's important to get the story right. So you're doing all the measurement, which is all the quantitative, factual stuff, but communicating this in a way that it resonates with different audiences is also something that I have come to appreciate as I have grown older. is a big part of the job.
Happy to hear that. I especially appreciate it because I've been in discussion. I've been a student myself because I did that course. It was part of the whole mid-career skills future course. But we were kind of struggling. Where do you get started? And I think what you shared about the industry, the sector is important. Because everybody has different passion points, right?
Yeah.
Somebody wants to get into solar, maybe somebody wants to get into wind. The sky is the limit, actually.
Yeah. And we need more people from the industry, right? Like we talked about climate at the beginning. Climate is a lot about changing existing processes, putting different, the large climate emitters are large-scale industries, right? Cement, transportation. I mean, these are industries that will have to change from within. While we're innovating outside, we also have to get these companies and these systems to adopt the innovative processes. So a lot of the change will come from within. So anyone who's in these industries and wants to make a difference, I think, where you are is kind of the right place to start. Because I would be very surprised today if any big corporate doesn't actually have quite a clear plan on what they're going to do. They may not do things fast enough for you, but they definitely have a plan of how they're going to, either reduce their emissions or, change processes, reduce pollutants, etc. Yeah.
We've talked about passions that our audience might have, that we might have ourselves about getting into this space. But maybe just to finish, I'd love to hear more about what your passion is.
I mean, a few things. So let me start with, for our organization, we are in a sort of next stage where we've, deployed Fund 1, we're raising Fund 2. We've had tremendous support from our stakeholders like Temasek Trust. So for me, a lot of focus this year is to just get more people on this journey, get them to join us for the fund, continue to kind of deploy capital. One of the conversations that I think we talked about earlier was, climate, people and planet. If you think about people and planet, it's important that we're talking about the whole planet, right? And a lot of conversations today in the fundraising world, I find, are very, very climate focused. So everybody's kind of, rightfully believes that solving climate will solve a lot of our challenges. But the reality is that for a number of developing countries, it's not a question of prioritizing one over the other. We have to continue to invest in social services, in social infrastructure. So I also I'm very passionate about kind of getting the Asian and the emerging markets voice out on impact investing. We need a lot more capital to be coming to our part of the world. And one of the things that, I'm trying to see how I can be a part of is also just making sure that there's a louder, coherent voice for the global South, for the emerging markets. So that's something that, I'm hoping to be able to do whatever I can in my small way to contribute. Yeah.
I'd love to hear what the audience has to say about the idea of the Global South kind of climate action plan, or how does the Global South, how is it considered when we think about the climate emergency? So if you've got anything to say on that, please do comment on this podcast. But thank you so much for joining us today. It's been really insightful.
Thank you, Sugandhi.
Thank you.
Lovely speaking with you.
Get in touch with us at Thai Talk if you've got any suggestions, recommendations, or feedback for us.
Subscribe to hear more from Thai Talks on entrepreneurship, investment, and impact. I'm Manisha.
And I'm Becca.
And thank you for listening.